The chamber is open and full of whispers.
The keystone of Avalon had not moved in 1,000 years. It sat in the floor of Gringotts Bank the way old things sit, completely still, completely patient, so unremarkable that the generations of witches and wizards who crossed it on their way to the teller desks had never once looked down. It was pale stone, 12 inches wide, carved with runes so worn by time that they were barely grooves at all. Goblins knew what it was. They had always known. And on the morning of August 1st, 1991, Ragnarok the Elder had felt it pulse from 3 floors up. 1 beat, half a second, like something drawing a breath, and walked downstairs. He had been waiting 340 years for this. Harry Potter came through the bronze doors at 10:47. Small, underdressed, wearing glasses held together at one hinge with a strip of sellotape, looking at everything. The vaulted ceilings, the chandeliers, the hundreds of goblins working at the long counter, with the concentrated hunger of someone kept in the dark for 10 years and now, for the first time, allowed to look. He crossed the lobby. The keystone ignited. The light came up the way certain silences do, not gradually, but all at once and total. It was white, not warm, not flickering, not like any source of light manufactured in the last 1,000 years. It was older than all of those things, and it knew it. The sound it made was every note simultaneously, a chord held perfectly, as if struck by a hand that had been waiting a very long time to play it. Every quill in the building stopped. Every goblin looked up. Ragnarok walked forward through the spreading light and knelt, one knee, his fist against the marble floor. Around him, like a wave moving outward from a stone dropped in still water, every goblin in the building followed. Harry had gone very still at the center of the light. It was coming from beneath him, from the stone under his feet, and he could feel it moving through the soles of his shoes, up through his legs, into his chest, settling somewhere behind his sternum like something fitting into a place that had been shaped for it. He didn't understand what was happening. He understood, the way children sometimes do before they can explain it, that it was important. He looked at Ragnarok. He looked at the 100 kneeling goblins. He looked at Hagrid, who looked like a man whose brain was actively refusing to process new information. Said Harry. The door opened. She came through it fast, her bushy brown hair pulled back, her parents somewhere behind her in the alley having been left mid-sentence. She stepped through the bronze doors and stopped dead. Her eyes moved across the kneeling goblins, the blazing stone, the half-giant pressed against the wall. They moved to Harry. The keystone doubled. The light went from white to white and blue simultaneously. 2 sources, 2 signatures. 2 things that had been separate for 1,000 years occupying the same space for the first time. Where Harry's light was still and absolute, hers moved in it the way water finds its level, not competing, not merging, but settling into an arrangement that was clearly correct and had always been. She looked at her own hand. It was glowing faintly, the color of moonlight on still water. She turned it over, examining it, with the expression of someone receiving confirmation of a hypothesis they hadn't yet written down. "That's dual signature primal resonance," she said. "I read about it in Antiquitates Magicae, but the text was ambiguous about whether it required simultaneous physical proximity or simply—" She stopped. "Is it meant to do that?" "I was going to ask you the same thing," said Harry. "I've never seen it happen. Neither have I." Ragnarok rose, the only goblin who stood, and walked to the teller desk, where he placed a piece of parchment with careful, deliberate hands. Not large, not decorated. A working document, dense with text in 3 languages, its runes glowing with the slow, certain gold of magic that had never once been interrupted. "The Charter of Avalon," he said. "Written in the year 973 by Merlin Emrys, Lord of the First House, in compact with the Goblin Nation. My line has held it for 31 generations." He looked at Harry. Then, at Hermione. "You are Lord Emrys. You are Lady Lefay. The keystone has confirmed both signatures. The charter is active." Hermione was already reading it, faster than was quite natural, her eyes moving across the text with the focused ease of someone whose instinct for this language was older than her own lifetime. Harry was watching Ragnarok. "How long has this been waiting?" Since the day Merlin set the keystone. 1,018 years. Harry looked at the stone. The light was steady now, simply present. The way important things are present. He could feel Hermione's magic on his left side, clear and structured, finding the shape of his own magic the way cool air fills a warm room. It was not comfortable exactly. It was right, which was a different thing, and larger. "The vault," said Hermione without looking up. "Merlin's vault." "Where is it?" "Sublevel 7. It has been waiting for your blood. And the Horcrux in my scar," said Harry quietly. "The charter mentions the Emrys core metabolizes foreign soul architecture. Does that mean, given sufficient time and sovereignty, yes, the core will dissolve it. We recommend the Isle of Avalon. The wards there are his own work." Hermione finally looked up. Something passed between her and Harry that was not yet language. The first note of a frequency they would spend the rest of their lives learning to play. "Month at Avalon," she said. "Vault first, then the island, then Hogwarts on the first." "That works. I'll need the full inventory of the Emrys archive. I'll ask Ragnok. And we'll need to tell my parents." "Of course." She produced a notebook. She uncapped a quill. She began, with the focused satisfaction of someone settling into the right work, to write. In the corner, Hagrid had not moved. He was looking at Harry with a complicated mixture of things, wonder and confusion and something close to grief, the grief of a man who had been told a simple story and had just realized it wasn't the whole truth. His hand had drifted, without his noticing, to the inside pocket of his coat, where the pink umbrella lived. Harry noticed. He looked at the umbrella. He looked at Hagrid, this enormous, gentle, entirely loyal man who had brought him a birthday cake, who had said you're a wizard. Harry with more genuine joy than anyone had ever aimed at Harry in his life. He smiled. Not a sovereign smile. The smile of a boy who had just felt something he recognized as the beginning of safety. "You don't have to hide it," Harry said. "Not from me." Hagrid burst into tears. Behind them, the keystone held its light, steady, patient, permanent. The chord it had struck at 10:47 did not fade. It settled into a pulse, low and even. The rhythm of something that had finally found what it was built to find. 1,000 years of waiting. 18 seconds of light. The rest could begin now. Sublevel 7 did not look like the rest of Gringotts. The walls were smooth in the way that river stones are smooth, shaped by something patient and continuous, and the stone itself was a deep, luminescent white, like chalk lit from inside. Ragnok carried no torch. The walls provided their own light, sourceless the way very old magic tends to be. "The vault is not a room," Ragnok said as they walked. "It was built to hold things, not contain them. A room that contains things is closed when the owner is absent. A room that holds them is waiting." There was no door, only an arch, perfectly proportioned. Its edges carved with runes as sharp and precise as the day they were made. Beyond it, the darkness of a space that had been patient so long it had forgotten what light felt like. Harry raised his right hand. The Emrys ring caught no light. It made its own. The stone parted, not dramatically, not with sound or force. It moved aside like water around a hand, smooth and without ceremony. And the darkness became light. They stepped through. The vault smelled of old light, not dust or stone or cold mineral, something warmer. Something that had been carefully kept. Hermione found the Merlin codices in 91 seconds, 47 volumes along the left wall, bound in something that was not quite leather, and not quite wood. The covers stamped with the Emrys Ouroboros in tarnished gold. She lifted volume 1, opened it to the first page, and went very still. "Harry, I can read this. What language is it?" "I don't know." She turned a page, then another. Her eyes moved fast. "But I can read it the way you read English, not translating, just reading." The language already existed somewhere inside me and I hadn't encountered it yet. She looked up with the deep satisfaction of a mechanism engaging correctly. LeFay instinct. LeFay instinct, he agreed. And she was, from that point, essentially gone. Harry moved through the vault. He found the staff of Emrys in a case against the far wall, taller than he was. made of dark wood spiraling in the same pattern as the rune on the keystone. He picked it up. The resonance was immediate and enormous. He held it for 15 seconds, feeling the way it matched his core's frequency exactly, the way it wanted to be used. He set it back down. He didn't need it yet. Possibly ever. He found the Avalon compass on the nearest table, a disk of pale stone, small enough to fit in his palm. He picked it up. It pulled. 7 directions simultaneously, 7 distinct signatures, 7 flavors of the same fundamental wrongness, like 7 notes of a chord that should not exist. He knew what they were before he had words for the knowledge. He wrote 7 entries in Hermione's spare notebook. Locations, impressions, the quality of each signal, and left it where she would find it. Then he went to tell her about Avalon. She held up one finger without looking up. He waited. She read for another 23 minutes. The Isle of Avalon received them without ceremony. The castle was not a ruin. Harry had expected collapsed walls and hollow grandeur, but the walls were clean, the windows unbroken. The great doors fitted perfectly in their hinges as if closed yesterday. The gardens were self-tending, the plants arranged in the sequences Merlin had encoded into the soil itself. "He expected us to come back," said Hermione. "He built it so we could," said Harry, and walked through every room that first afternoon, his hand trailing along walls, the castle learning him as he moved, the wards adjusting their calibration, updating their record of what an Emrys signature felt like after 1,000 years of dormancy. Hermione found the library within 4 minutes, and began a catalogue. The training was not structured. There was no syllabus, no teacher. 2 11-year-olds with the most advanced magical library in human history, and the slowly dawning understanding that the only way to learn what they were was to stop approaching it from the outside, and simply become it. On day 3, Harry sat in the middle of the practice hall for an hour and stopped trying. He breathed out and the temperature dropped, perceptibly. The air cooling in a clean radius. He breathed in and it returned. He did this until the pattern was legible. Hermione had been watching from the doorway for 40 minutes. When the pattern became consistent, she stepped into the room and did not add her own magic to his. She simply supported the structure of it, the way a second hand steadies a page being written on. The swings became exact. "Controllable, your magic responds to respiration," she said, quill moving. "Conscious regulation through physiology rather than incantation. We can use this. Is that in the codex?" "It is now," she said, and wrote it down. On day 12 they discovered what the codex called dual sovereign synchronization, and what Harry privately thought of as the obvious thing. Because by day 12 it was obvious, when they worked in proximity, each became more than they were alone. Not additive, multiplicative, Hermione's precision increased his control across the entire frequency range of his core. His force extended the range of her structural magic to distances that had previously required inscription. They were, simply and without sentiment, better together than either was alone. On day 22, Harry told her about the Hollow, not Voldemort's voice exactly, but something shaped like the Horcrux's absence, an echo of a frequency that was, day by day, becoming quieter. The Emrys core was working, but the process had weight, and on some nights, the weight was considerable. He told her at breakfast, the way he'd learned she preferred information delivered, without preamble. She set down her tea. "How do I help?" "Stay where I can sense you. I can feel the LeFay signature from the other wing. It anchors the room." She didn't say anything about this. That evening she rearranged the LeFay archive so it was visible from the doorway of the Emrys study. She left a candle burning in the window when she went to bed. The Horcrux took 28 days. On the morning of day 29, Harry ran his thumb across his forehead in the bathroom mirror and felt nothing but smooth skin. No hollow. No echo. No frequency that was not entirely his own. He went to breakfast and ate 3 pieces of toast and said nothing. Hermione looked at him once, looked at his forehead, and returned to her codex. "Day 29, she said. "Day 29, he confirmed. She wrote it down. On day 30 she presented him with 60 pages, a summary of the Merlin Codice's implications for modern magical theory, 17 pages of questions to investigate, and a preliminary governance framework extrapolated from the Charter's constitutional principles, and placed it before him with the energy of someone who has done the most interesting work of their life, and knows it. Harry read it properly, and when he looked up his expression was the one he had been developing over 30 days of working beside her. The one that meant exactly what I needed. Precisely when I needed it. This is brilliant, he said. I know, she said, with the clean satisfaction of someone who has stopped apologizing for being right. Where do you want to start? He turned to page 4. The dissolution protocols, the Emrys method for unmaking a Horcrux without destroying its container, refined across 47 volumes into a process so precise it could be performed in silence. Page 4, he said. Hermione was already there. I thought you'd say that, she said. And they began. The Hogwarts Express left King's Cross at 11 o'clock, and by 11:03 every student in the nearest 4 compartments had found a reason to walk slowly past the door at the end of the carriage. They were not wearing school robes. Hermione had researched this with forensic thoroughness. The Hogwarts founding charter stipulated that enrolled students were required to be present, cooperative, and willing to learn. It specified no dress code for sovereign heirs. Harry's robes were white and deep blue. The Emrys Ouroboros worked in gold at the left breast. Hermione's were deep blue and silver, the Lefay crescent precise and fine. They did not look like children in costume. They looked like what they were, which was the same thing, and entirely different. The compartment door opened. The boy who came in was red-haired, freckled, with a smear of something on his nose, and the look of someone who has been refused seats in other compartments for 20 minutes. He looked at Harry. He looked at Hermione. He looked at the robes. Everywhere else is full, he said, with the directness of someone who has decided honesty is simpler than tact. Sit down if you like, said Harry, without looking up. The boy sat. He looked at them both with the focused curiosity of someone genuinely trying to work something out. You're different, he said finally. Harry looked up. Good different, or bad different? The boy thought about this with evident seriousness. I'm not sure yet. Harry found that he liked this answer considerably. Most people either decided immediately the difference was good and became unctuous, or decided it was threatening and became defensive. This boy was treating it as an open question requiring more data, which was the correct approach. Ron Weasley, said the boy. Harry Potter. Hermione Granger. Ron's eyes went briefly wide at the first name, then returned to his measuring expression. I heard about the Gringotts thing. My dad works at the ministry. He said the Charter of Avalon had activated, that the last time anything like that happened, the Goblin Nation sent a formal delegation to the sitting minister. He paused. He seemed interested rather than worried, which is how I knew it was significant. Dad worries about small things and gets interested in large ones. Your father sounds sensible, said Harry. Ron offered a box of chocolate frogs without ceremony. Harry took one. Hermione, after a moment's consideration, took one and read the card with the speed of someone updating an internal catalog. The door opened again. The boy in front was pale and pointed, his robes more expensive than anyone else's on the train. His 2 large companions suggesting function over form. He had the bearing of someone who had been told he was important since before he could walk. Potter, he said. I'm Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. The pause after the surname was designed to produce a reaction. I can help you navigate the wizarding world. You'll find there are certain families who carry real weight here. You want to know which are which before you start making friends. His eyes moved to Ron with the quality of dismissal that requires no words. How interesting, said Harry. He set his codex down. Tell me, do you know what house your family was in before Salazar Slytherin organized Hogwarts into its current structure? Draco blinked. This was not the response his preparation had anticipated. They were always. Slytherin, House Malfoy has existed for 6 centuries. Slytherin built the house system in the 10th century. I asked what you were before. He's pointing out, said Hermione without looking up from her card, that the blood status hierarchy you're so proud of is 600 years younger than the actual magical hierarchy. And in the actual hierarchy, your family is not in the top 50. The silence that followed was the silence of someone whose primary social mechanism had just stopped working and who had not yet located the secondary one. Draco Malfoy left, his companions filing out behind him with mild confusion. Ron watched the door close. "That was the most efficient thing I've ever seen." "It was accurate," said Hermione. "Which generally is efficient." Ron looked at Harry. "Is she always like that?" "I've known her for a month," said Harry. Yes, the great hall went quiet when they walked in. Not all at once, in a wave, starting at the doors and moving toward the head table, the way cold air moves through a room when a window opens. Conversations ran out, one by one, as attention shifted and the next sentence didn't arrive. By the time Harry and Hermione reached the center of the hall, the quiet was total, 500 students absorbing the fact of them. The Emrys and Lefay crests caught the candlelight. The castle itself adjusted. Not dramatically, not obviously. But Harry felt it through the soles of his feet. The ley line network beneath Hogwarts registering the arrival of 2 signatures it had been calibrated to receive for 974 years, making small internal adjustments the way a building makes adjustments when its owner comes home. When Professor McGonagall said Potter, Harry, the quiet that was already present became something else, heavier. The quiet of a room collectively holding its breath. Harry walked to the stool and sat. McGonagall placed the hat on his head. It covered his eyes. In the dark beneath it, nothing happened for 1 second. 2, 3. The hat did not speak to Harry. It simply encountered the Emrys core, that deep architecturally complete magical structure, and understood. With the particular understanding of an object that has spent nearly a millennium processing human magical signatures, exactly what it was sitting on. When it spoke, it did not say a house name. It spoke to the room. "I have sorted 1,743 students in the 974 years of my existence. I have never, until this evening, had occasion to use the words I am now compelled to speak by the compact of my making." In the second row of the Gryffindor table, Ron looked at Neville Longbottom. Neville looked back. "The throne is returned," said the hat. "The sovereigns are present. Lord Emrys and Lady Lefay stand before this hall. I do not sort them. I welcome them." The silence lasted 5 seconds. Harry could feel the precise shape of it. Not shock exactly, but the specific moment before a structure reorganizes itself around new information. At the head table, Dumbledore sat very still, his hands flat on the table. He had suspected. He was too intelligent not to have suspected, once the ministry notifications arrived in August. But suspicion and confirmation are different things, and confirmation carried weight. McGonagall retrieved her quill from the floor where it had fallen. "Your whole plan," she said quietly. "Yes," said Dumbledore. "Entirely requires revision." He was quiet for a moment. "I find I'm not entirely opposed to that." The chairs at the head table had been there since the school's founding, 2 seats. Slightly grander than the others, their backs carved with the paired crests of Emrys and Lefay. Harry felt them activate when they crossed the threshold, a deep, structural click somewhere in the castle's magical architecture. The seats unlocking the way rooms unlock when their rightful occupant produces a key. After the feast, McGonagall approached with administrative forms. Dormitory assignments, class schedules, the standard paperwork of first year organized into neat stacks. Harry took the forms. He looked at them. He handed them to Hermione. "We'll be sleeping in the sovereign quarters," he said. McGonagall's expression moved through several positions with remarkable speed. There are no sovereign quarters. There is no precedent, 7th floor," said Hermione, looking at the ceiling with the focused stillness of someone reading a frequency. "West Tower. Behind the portrait of Godric Gryffindor's sister. Sealed since 986 AD. Somewhere in the walls of Hogwarts, deep in the stone. A door unlocked." The sound was low, felt more than heard, like a chord played too deep for the ear. McGonagall looked at the ceiling. She looked at her forms. She placed both stacks carefully on the table. "I'll have the house elves prepare the rooms," she said, in the tone of a woman who has decided composure is the only available strategy, and walked away with her spine very straight. The first weeks at Hogwarts established a rhythm the staff took approximately 4 days to accept, and 4 more days to stop trying to modify. Harry and Hermione attended classes that offered something they hadn't covered. Transfiguration, because McGonagall's precision contained 2 structural innovations Merlin hadn't anticipated. Charms, because Flitwick's technique was genuinely excellent. Astronomy once, for ley line calibration data, which they collected and did not explain. Defense against the dark arts they attended on the first day, sat through 40 minutes of Quirrell's performance, and did not return. Harry had identified the possession signature within the first 10 minutes. A double frequency beneath whatever Quirrell was outwardly projecting. 2 notes, neither entirely his own. He told Hermione afterward, in the corridor. "How long has he been like that?" she said. "Since before term. Probably since Albania. The fragment is small, it surfaces when it needs something and retreats when it doesn't." "When does it need something?" "When it's looking." Harry paused. "We have something it wants." Hermione circled a date in her notebook 6 weeks out. "We let it look. We learn its method. Then we deal with it properly." They watched Quirrell instead, with the patient attention of people who understand that intelligence gathered is worth more than a threat neutralized prematurely. Hermione logged every inconsistency, the moments when the stutter slipped, the occasions when his knowledge of advanced defensive magic surfaced unbidden. Harry tracked the signature. By November he had logged 43 observations. The picture they built together over 6 weeks was clear. Whatever Tom Riddle had been at full strength, the remnant of him understood operational security. They were learning about him faster than he was learning about them. That gap would matter. In October, Gilderoy Lockhart, 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award, appeared in Hogsmeade to promote his latest book. Harry had read it in 2 hours at Avalon. Hermione had annotated her copy with 17 factual corrections, and 1 note that simply read "This did not happen," underlined 3 times. They took seats in the front row. Lockhart made it 3 minutes and 40 seconds before Hermione raised her hand. "In Chapter 4, she said, you described defeating the Wagga Wagga werewolf using a complex memory charm. Could you walk us through the wand movement? I'd love to see a demonstration." Something moved behind Lockhart's smile, not fear exactly, but the animal recognition of terrain that might not be safe. "The text describes it as a standard obliviate modification," said Harry, with the mild interest of someone raising a minor technical point. "Any competent practitioner should be able to demonstrate it safely. Shouldn't they?" The pause before the next smile was a quarter second too long. "We thought as much," said Harry. He stood. Hermione stood beside him. "We'll note to Professor Dumbledore that the Defense Against the Dark Arts position should look elsewhere for next year. He never taught at Hogwarts." The position went instead to a retired Auror, with an extremely competent grasp of counterjinx theory. The students found him somewhat dull. Harry found him precise. Which was better? In early November, Lucius Malfoy arrived at Hogwarts for the Board of Governors' quarterly meeting the way he always arrived, as the most significant person in the room. He came through the castle gates in grey robes that communicated expense without vulgarity, his silver cane striking the flagstones with the rhythm of a man who has never had to adjust his pace for anyone. Harry and Hermione were standing near the base of the main staircase. Not waiting, Hermione was reviewing a document, Harry reading the ley line current through the floor, but present and visible. Lucius recalibrated. He had been briefed on the Gringotts incident and had decided the briefing was exaggerated. "Potter," he said, the absence of a title deliberate. "Ambitious, for a first year." "Lord Malfoy," said Harry pleasantly. "Your board seat was acquired through a donation to the Hogwarts Building Fund in 1987. Is that correct?" Hermione produced a document from her folder. "The Hogwarts founding charter stipulates that board membership is subject to sovereign review." She did not refer to notes. 6 instances of undue influence in curriculum decisions between 1988 and 1991. 2 instances of attempted staff dismissal without documented cause. 1 instance of concealing a magically significant artifact from ministry inventory in 1989. That third one is particularly interesting, given what we've identified through the Avalon Compass regarding your personal vault's contents. Lucius's voice, when it came, was measured. "You have no authority to read the deed." Harry raised his right hand slightly, making the Emery's ring visible. Through the soles of his feet he felt the castle's attention, the slight structural adjustment of Hogwarts turning toward its sovereign the way a compass turns toward north. "You serve on my board. In my school. On my land. I'm terminating your membership effective this moment. Gringotts will process the documentation by end of day. Your access to the grounds is revoked pending review of those 3 items. Lucius Malfoy looked into Harry Potter's green eyes, steady, unhurried, carrying the weight of 1,000 years of accumulated authority behind 11 years of living, and encountered something for which his entire social toolkit had no response. Not a stronger version of what he was. Something of a different order entirely. The silver cane struck the flagstone once. He walked toward the doors. Harry turned to Hermione. That's 1 Horcrux location confirmed. The diary. I wrote to Gringotts yesterday. The reclamation clause is ready to file. The Gringotts delegation arrived at Malfoy Manor on Friday, 3 goblins. A document bearing the Charter's reclamation clause in Ragnarok's own hand, and the collective demeanor of people who have not come to negotiate. The diary arrived at Sublevel 7 in a lead-lined case that afternoon. Harry placed it on the flat stone at the center of the vault chamber and breathed on it. The Emrys core reached into the diary's structure. Not fighting, not burning. Simply identifying the foreign architecture and applying the dissolution sequence with quiet efficiency. The pages rippled, a face pressed outward, young, handsome, dark-eyed, Tom Riddle at 16, and then neither. 11 seconds. Harry dropped the blank diary in the waste bin. 3 down. 4 to go. The compass has the next one, said Hermione. Ring Horcrux. Gaunt Shack. Little Hangleton. They went to the 3rd floor on a Friday afternoon in late November, while the castle was occupied with Quidditch. The door opened for Harry the way all of Hogwarts doors opened for him now, with the quiet mechanical ease of a lock that has no reason to remain locked. Harry could feel the stone from the doorway, not the stone itself, but the ley-line disturbance around it. The accumulated weight of Flamel's 4th century working pressing against the castle's natural infrastructure, with the particular density of something that has been in one place for a very long time. They went through the traps at a walk. The devil's snare filled the first chamber, its tendrils reaching in the darkness. Harry breathed out, a long controlled exhale, and the plant recoiled from the heat radius before it made contact, its grip releasing into limp hanging strands. The key chamber. Hermione raised her right hand, and the correct key, the large iron one with the bent wing, visible immediately to the LeFay pattern reading as the only object whose magical signature didn't match its apparent age, swung out from the flock and dropped cleanly into her palm. She caught it without looking at it. The chess game. Hermione stood at the edge of the board and was quiet for 45 seconds, her eyes moving in the grid pattern she used when processing spatial arrangements. King's knight to f3. Bishop to c4. It resolves in 4 moves. The white side won't have a reason to engage us. They walked through. The chess queen tracked them but did not raise her sword. The troll beyond was already unconscious. Quirrell's preliminary work. Harry noted it. Filed it away. The potion chamber. Hermione read the riddle in the time it would have taken someone else to finish the first line, picked up the smallest bottle with liquid the color of a flame's heart, and set it on the table. Beautifully constructed, actually. Correct logic, clean parameters. She looked at the riddle once more. Snape, the syntax is his. They went through the final door. The last chamber was cold and high-ceilinged, the mirror of Arist standing against the far wall with the particular quality of presence that very old magical objects carry. They sat on the floor in front of it and ate the sandwiches Hermione had packed. Quirrell arrived 40 minutes later. He saw the mirror. He moved toward it. He had not yet processed what was already in the room when Harry said, "Evening, Professor," and Quirrell stopped. The stutter did not arrive. What arrived instead was the stillness of the thing wearing Quirrell's face, rearranging its strategy in real time. The turban unwound. The face on the back of Quirrell's skull was white as chalk, its features arranged in the specific configuration of a man who has spent 50 years removing everything that wasn't power, and is now confronted with something he doesn't have a category for. "The heir of Emrys," said Voldemort. "Do you know who I am? Do you understand what I am?" Harry stood. Unhurried. "Yes, you're a magical signature I finished processing 23 days ago. What was left of you was in my head for a month. I know your architectural framework better than you do." The silence that followed was not shock, but the rapid internal calculation of a very intelligent person encountering a variable they had not modeled. "That's not possible," said Voldemort. "Your Horcrux fragment metabolized into approximately 3% of my total core capacity, which puts your full magical strength, current state, all remaining anchors included, at perhaps 15% of a complete Emrys signature." Harry considered this with the detached interest of someone reviewing an inventory. "You're not a rival, Tom. You're fuel that's already been burned." Hermione raised her right hand and made a small gesture, precise, minimal. The stone slid out of the mirror's frame and settled into her palm. She held it up, examining it in the chamber's cold light. 4th century alchemical work. Genuinely beautiful construction. She looked at Voldemort with the expression she used when a text contained a fundamental error in its premise. "You don't need this. You need to stop being half a soul distributed across 7 objects and 1 borrowed body. That's not a power problem. It's a structural one." Quirrell's body took a step back. Voldemort's voice, when it came, had shed the performance entirely. What was underneath was something smaller and more honest. The sound of something that has been afraid for a very long time, and has just understood that the thing it feared was always going to arrive. Harry placed one hand on Quirrell's forehead. He did not push. He did not burn. The Emrys core extended into the possession bond with the quality of attention he had spent a month developing at Avalon. The capacity to feel the precise shape of a magical structure, to find where it was joined, to address the attachment point directly. A soul fragment clinging to a living host is always weak. It has no anchor, only grip. And grip fails when something stronger simply removes it. The possession bond separated. The fragment came free, a barely visible smear of dark light, hanging in the air for the 3 seconds it took the Emrys core to identify it as the same architectural signature it had metabolized before, to recognize the framework, and complete the process. 11 seconds. Quirrell folded to the floor. Harry caught him before he hit the stone and lowered him. Quirrell was breathing. His own frequency, clean and singular, was already reasserting itself. He's not gone. 6 remaining anchors. But this piece is finished. He looked at Hermione. The ring is in Little Hangleton. I know. I've drafted the approach for the Gaunt Shack. The variant dissolution protocol for stone-set fragments is on page 61 of my supplement. Of course you did. She looked up briefly. The note to Dumbledore, 2 paragraphs. Should I add a third about Flamel? Yes, he should return the stone. Include our recommendation about the longevity approach. He's been working from the wrong premise for 4 centuries, and someone should tell him. I'll word it diplomatically. You always do. She wrote it. Harry took it, and they left the chamber at a walk, up through the castle to Dumbledore's office. Harry pushed the note under the door. In his office above, Dumbledore heard the faint slide of parchment against flagstone. He read the note once, then again. He set it on his desk. He looked at Fawkes. Fawkes made a sound that communicated nothing in particular. "I have been," said Dumbledore, in the tone of a man making a precise and honest assessment, slightly outpaced. Fawkes ruffled his feathers, closed his eyes and went to sleep, which was, in the circumstances, the only reasonable response available. Harry had been speaking to snakes since September. By November he had spoken to 11 snakes in 4 species, and accumulated a detailed map of the castle's lower corridors based entirely on serpent traffic patterns. The most surprising piece of information came from a small brown snake near the base of the east wall, who described with the matter-of-fact quality of someone reporting a well-known fact, a very large, very old, very sad sister who lived below the school and had not spoken to anyone in longer than the small snake could reckon. Harry thanked her. He went upstairs and knocked on the archway of the sovereign's study. "There's a basilisk under the school," he said. Hermione looked up. A pause of approximately 3 seconds. "Salazar Slytherins," she said. That would follow. A basilisk. She said it differently, not a question, but someone placing a thing in its correct category. 60 feet minimum if it survived since the 10th century. She reached for her notebook. "I'll need a periscope." They went on a Wednesday afternoon, having told no one. The entrance was in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, a specific sync, a specific combination of parcel-tongue syllables, and the floor opened. Harry went first. The pipe deposited him in a tunnel that smelled of old water and something older than water. Hermione landed precisely behind him, already holding the periscope she had constructed that morning from a mirror, a length of pipe, and 3 refraction charms. "Don't look directly," she said. "I know. The petrification is instantaneous. The antidote requires mandrake maturation. 6 months minimum. Hermione, I'm noting it for the record." They walked the length of the tunnel. The final door opened at Parseltongue. Beyond it, the chamber. Cathedral-ceilinged, columns carved into serpent shapes rising from dark water, the stone green gray and cold, the air completely still in the way of places that have not exchanged their atmosphere with the outside world in a very long time. Harry stood at the water's edge and said, "In Parseltongue, I am the heir of Emrys. I am told there is a sister here who has been waiting." The water moved. She rose the way deep things rise, without haste, without drama. The first sign of her was the dark curve of an impossibly large neck breaking the surface, then the head, broader than a car, the scales the color of old copper gone green. He felt her eyes as a pressure in his peripheral vision, the Emrys core registering the basilisk's gaze the way it registered any significant magical field, as information, as weight. She spoke in old Parseltongue, longer syllables, grammar he had to reach for. He understood approximately 2/3 of it immediately. "You smell like the founder, like the first speaker." "I have waited." He felt the sentence in his chest before he assembled it in his mind. "I am his heir," he said. "I am sorry you have been alone." The great head tilted. Not the tilt of a creature sizing up prey, the tilt of something old enough to recognize sincerity when it hears it. "You speak with authority. Do you claim the chamber?" He thought carefully about the precise thing he wanted to say, because it mattered to say it precisely. "I claim you, if you'll accept it. Not as property. As companion." The water was still. The chamber was still. From behind him, faintly, Harry could hear the small sound of Hermione writing. The basilisk was quiet for a long moment. 1,000 years of it, concentrated, the last heir I served was locked in a memory. Cold. He tasted of nothing but himself. She lowered her head, slowly, the weight of it immense, the motion deliberate, until the broad flat plane of her skull was level with the waterline. "You taste of old power and something warm. I will serve you. Not bound. Not commanded." The difference mattered, and she knew it mattered. He reached out and placed his hand on the top of her head, between the eyes he was not looking at, feeling the scales, cool, precise, each one fitted to its neighbors with the exactness of armor made by someone who cared about the work. "Thank you," he said. From behind him, Hermione said, in careful, heavily accented Parseltongue she had been practicing in the sovereign quarters for 2 weeks without telling him, "I am also glad to meet you." The basilisk appeared to assess this arrangement, then appeared to find it reasonable. "The small speaker learns," she said. "She says you're learning," Harry told Hermione. "I know," said Hermione, still looking through the periscope. "I caught most of that. The ablative structure is different from what the Codex described." She made a note. "Ask her if the chamber library is accessible." The chamber became, over the following weeks, a working space. Slytherin's library along the eastern wall contained 400 years of magical research. Hermione catalogued it in 11 days, using the periscope system for the first 5 before transitioning to a setup of indirect sight mirrors. She improved progressively until she could work at the shelves directly, with a 90-degree avoidance angle she had calculated to eliminate any possibility of accidental eye contact. The basilisk watched this process with what Harry read as appreciation for the methodology. "She does not look," the basilisk observed one afternoon. "But she is not afraid. She read about basilisks. She respects the danger. She doesn't stop working because of it. That is better than courage," the basilisk said. "Courage is often careless. This is not careless." He translated this for Hermione that evening. She looked up from the catalogue. "Tell her I said thank you." He did. The basilisk lowered her head by 3 inches, which Harry had learned was the serpent equivalent of a nod. The residue found them in November. Not the basilisk. She was clear of it. Had been clear of it since before Riddle's memory had been sealed away in the diary, which was itself now destroyed. What remained was structural, the specific quality of Parseltongue that Tom Riddle had spoken into the chamber's walls over the years of his manipulation. The imprint of a voice and an intent that had soaked into stone the way damp soaks into stone. Persistent, directionless. A program that had outlasted its programmer. Harry felt it in the walls on a Tuesday afternoon, working alone while Hermione was in the library. A cold texture in the ambient magic, a shape without a source. The unmistakable framework of Tom Riddle's magical signature, without anything living to animate it. He stood in the center of the chamber and spoke to it. Not in English. In Parseltongue, the old form, the one that reached furthest down. Tom Riddle was afraid, he said. The words went into the stone and the stone received them, and the residue stirred the way residue stirs when something addresses it directly. What he feared most was love. Because love is the one thing that outlasts power. I know this because what dissolved your Horcrux was not force. It was the simple fact that it touched the love my mother made, and could not survive contact with something that genuine. The residue moved through the walls, not approaching, receding, fading, the cold imprint dissolving as the Emrys core's warmth extended into the stone, and simply occupied the space the residue had been using, the way light occupies a room when you open the shutters. You were always fighting the wrong war, Tom. The chamber went quiet. A different quiet from before, not the quiet of something withheld, but the quiet of something finished. The basilisk surfaced from the far end of the water. She regarded the walls. She regarded Harry. "It is clean," she said. "Yes, I have been waiting for that also," she said. "Longer than for you." He stayed with her for a while after that, in the clean quiet of a place that had been carrying something old and wrong for a very long time, and had finally, in the span of one afternoon, been allowed to set it down. The Sirius Black file took Hermione 48 hours to read, and approximately 4 minutes to assess. She found it in the Emrys Archives legal section, the Goblin's own account of every significant magical legal proceeding in Britain since 1752, kept comprehensive and unsentimentally accurate. The Sirius Black entry was dated November 1981 and was extraordinarily brief. There was no trial record, no charges formally filed with the Wizengamot, no evidence summary, no witness testimony, no judicial review, just a ministry detention order signed by Bartemius Crouch Sr., and a transfer authorization to Azkaban dated 3 days after the arrest. 12 years of nothing. Hermione came to Harry's study doorway at just past 10 in the evening with her notebook and the look she got when something had violated her sense of structural order so thoroughly that the violation itself had become a fact requiring address. "He was never tried," she said. "Charter violation?" said Harry. Article 4, Section 3. No person accused of magical crimes may be held without formal Wizengamot hearing for a period exceeding 30 days. He has been held for 12 years. The violation is categorical and total. I'll submit the sovereign petition before term ends. I've already drafted it," she said. The Avalon Compass found Peter Pettigrew in a field outside Ottery St. Catchpole, living as a rat in the garden of the Weasley family. The Goblin delegation carrying the sovereign warrant arrived before noon. Peter had nowhere to go. The wizard underneath the rat found, upon transforming, that the 3 goblins surrounding him were entirely unmoved by his crying. The Wizengamot convened in August. The chamber was full with the pressed, watchful fullness of an institution that knows it is about to account for itself. Harry sat in the sovereign position. Peter was brought in, his wrists in chains that wrapped around him, and then seemed to reconsider, as if finding him too small to bother with fully, and he looked around the room until he found Harry. Harry did not look away. The truth resonance did not reach into Peter's mind and take anything. It simply made the room feel, to anyone whose primary relationship with authority was built on assuming lying was always an option, like a place where lying was not. Standing in the field of the Emrys Core's extended awareness, and attempting to construct a false account of one's actions felt, Peter would later describe to his solicitor, like trying to light a fire under water. Peter confessed, not bravely, but in the specific deflating way of someone who has sustained a story for 12 years and has abruptly lost the will to maintain it. Sirius was freed before noon. He came out of the ministry building into August sunlight looking like a man testing whether the ground will hold. Thin in the way that 12 years of Dementor proximity makes a person thin. Not merely the body, but the quality of presence. The margins of him worn fine by sustained proximity to despair. He stood on the steps, and breathed, and did not move. Then he looked down. Harry was standing at the bottom of the steps. Sirius looked at him for a long time, not assessing a stranger, but finding a face carried in memory for 12 years and measuring what time had done to the original. The green eyes, the dark hair. "You have your mother's eyes," he said finally, his voice rough with disuse. "But that expression, that careful, weighing expression, that's pure James." Harry had prepared nothing to say. "I'm sorry it took so long. I would have done it sooner if I'd known sooner." Sirius came down the last 3 steps. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, the sound of someone finding that their capacity for uncomplicated emotion was returning faster than they expected. "Don't be sorry. You were 11 when you came to this world." A pause. Your father would have understood none of the legal architecture. He'd have punched someone by the second hearing. Your mother would have been you. "Thank you," said Sirius, and it cost him something to say. "For not giving up on it." "It was the right thing to do," said Harry. That's all. They stood for a moment in the August light, the ministry building at their backs. Neither of them moved to end it. Sirius was looking at Harry with the particular quality of someone who has been running a calculation for a very long time and has just reached the final sum, not disbelieving the number, simply sitting with it, giving it its proper weight. "How much do you know?" Sirius said finally. "About them. About James. About her." "Most of it," said Harry. "The archive has 40 years of correspondence, letters, financial records, the Emery's estate's accounts of the Fidelius arrangement. I know the shape of it." He paused. "But records are records. I know what they did. I don't know what it felt like to be in the room with them." Sirius looked at him for a moment. Then he laughed, properly this time. Not the brief fractured sound from the steps, but a real one, the laugh of someone who has found something genuinely, unexpectedly funny in an unfunny year. "You sound exactly like her," he said. That sentence, "I know what they did, not what it felt like to be in the room," that is exactly how she would have made that distinction. He shook his head, still smiling. "It's going to take me some time to get used to you." "We have time," said Harry. "Yes," said Sirius. "I suppose we do." He said it like someone who, until very recently, had not been able to say that, and mean it. Remus Lupin arrived at Hogwarts a week before term began, and Harry found him in his office on a Tuesday morning, carrying boxes of textbooks and the particular expression of someone who has been given something they had stopped expecting to receive. Harry knocked on the open door. Lupin turned. He looked at Harry with the same quality of recognition Sirius had brought to the ministry steps, the face reading of someone who had loved the originals. "Lord." "Harry," said Harry. "Please, Harry. You were my father's friend." "I was." The word carrying more weight than its size. "Good." Harry came into the office and sat down in the chair across from the desk. "I know the facts about who he was. I have the archive, the letters, 40 years of Emery's record-keeping." He looked at Lupin steadily. "I want to know what made him laugh." Lupin was quiet for a long moment, the quiet of someone excavating a memory from a place they have not accessed in years because access was too costly. "He laughed when Sirius did something brilliant," he said finally. "Not just impressive. Brilliant, the specific kind where you could see the moment the idea arrived. He laughed when things went wrong in an interesting way. He laughed when your mother said something devastating and completely accurate at the same moment. Which was often." He stopped. Then, carefully, he was also loyal in a way that was almost violent. Not the word, perhaps, but he didn't do things by halves. If he loved someone, there was no version of that in which he was only partially in. That capacity, Lupin paused, choosing the word precisely. It was both the best thing about him and the thing that made Sirius's arrest so destructive. Because James would have trusted Sirius absolutely. And when that trust was apparently betrayed, the part of him that had given it, he looked at the window. He didn't have long enough to reconcile it. I have spent 12 years doing the reconciling he didn't get to do. The room was quiet for a moment. He would have been so proud of you, he said. The sentence arrived the way those sentences do, as fact, as grief, as both simultaneously. I know, said Harry. But tell me anyway. The Dementors came on the first Hogsmeade weekend, Ministry deployment, ostensibly in response to Sirius's escape, now resolved but the paperwork lagging, the creatures already stationed, and the authorization to recall them caught in bureaucratic amber. Harry walked out to the boundary of the outermost patrol on a Saturday morning with Hermione beside him. Her notebook open, her timing charm active. The nearest Dementor moved toward him. Harry felt it reach, felt the feeding instinct engage, felt it locate the core and begin to draw. The core let it draw. It pushed forward everything it had. The month at Avalon, Hermione's face when the codex opened in her mind, Hagrid's birthday cake, the hat bowing, Sirius on the ministry steps in August sunlight, Remus saying he would have been so proud. Every warm thing in 13 years of an unusual life that had, despite everything, accumulated more warmth than should have been possible. The Dementor had never encountered an Emrys core. It had never had a source pushback. It recoiled, not dramatically, but with the unmistakable quality of something that has reached for food, and found the food considerably larger than expected. Harry said, in the register that was not volume but weight, "You are not permitted here. Leave Britain. You are not needed." The Dementor left. He moved to the next one. 104 Dementors. 43 minutes. The efficiency improved after the first 20, the core finding its rhythm, the authority settling into a cadence, the message identical each time, because it was true each time. Hermione wrote, total duration, 43 min. Average, 24.8 sec/Dementor. Efficiency improved significantly after first 20. She looked up. The grounds were empty of cold. The November air was simply cold, which was entirely different. Done, she said. Done, said Harry. Cornelius Fudge arrived at Hogwarts 4 days later in the specific state of a man whose infrastructure has been rearranged without his knowledge. He chose outrage in the entrance hall, switched briefly to diplomacy on the stairs, and arrived at the sovereign quarters having exhausted both without resolution. Tea was already served. Hermione had known the approximate day of arrival from Ministry scheduling patterns, and had prepared accordingly. Fudge read the first page of the brief, and began to bluster. Harry placed the Emrys ring on the table between them. Minister, the Dementors violated Article 4 of the Charter by being deployed against students under sovereign protection. I've cleared them from British territory. This is sovereign prerogative under the Charter, which predates the Ministry by 734 years. He left a pause. You are welcome to draft legislation on the matter. I look forward to reading it in my capacity as Charter Arbiter. Fudge opened his mouth. Hermione said, without looking up from her copy of the brief, the tea is getting cold, Minister. Fudge looked at the tea. He looked at the ring. He looked at 2 13-year-olds watching him with the patient, unhurried attention of people who have considerably more time than he does. He drank the tea. The Goblet of Fire had been making decisions for 700 years without encountering a situation it didn't have a category for. Harry and Hermione approached it on a Thursday evening when the entrance hall was quiet. Their parchment was sealed, the Emrys Ouroboros pressed into dark wax on one side, the Lefay crescent on the other, the Charter seal across the join. The designation line read, in the formal Latin of the Charter's constitutional language, the Imperial House of Emrys Lefay, acting in sovereign capacity within its own jurisdiction, hereby registers voluntary participation in the Triwizard Tournament as concurrent with and distinct from the Standard School Champion Protocol. Harry placed it in the flame. The goblet received it. Something in its 700-year logic paused. the moment of an ancient magical instrument encountering a variable its original makers had not anticipated, but had, in their wisdom, not prohibited. Then the flame returned to its steady turning, carrying inside it a new entry in a classification it had just, for the first time in 7 centuries, invented. The champion's selection ceremony produced 3 names in sequence: Cedric Diggory, Fleur Delacour, Victor Crumb, and then the goblet paused. 4 seconds, which was 3.5 longer than any pause in recorded tournament history. Then the flame turned gold for 1 moment, and a 4th piece of parchment came out. Dumbledore caught it. "Read it." His expression moved through several positions before settling. "The Imperial House of Emrys le Fay," he read aloud. The great hall was silent in the specific way of a very large number of people whose existing categories had just been rendered insufficient. Dumbledore looked across the room to where Harry and Hermione were seated. "The goblet appears to have created a new entry classification," he said carefully. "It recognized the Charter Seal," said Hermione. "Ancient magical contract law doesn't distinguish between school-based authority and sovereign authority. Both constitute valid jurisdictional claims. We'd be happy to withdraw if you prefer, but you'd need to negotiate that with the goblet directly." No one negotiated with the goblet. The first task was dragons. Harry walked into the arena with Hermione beside him. The Hungarian horntail was chained at the far end, her attention on Harry with the specific focus of a creature that has been facing wand-waving humans for 2 days, and has developed a comprehensive policy of hostility. She was 40 feet of armored fury, and she was afraid, not of Harry, but for the eggs behind her, the fear of a mother who can find no option except aggression. Harry stopped at a comfortable distance and spoke in Parseltongue. "You are afraid for your eggs. I understand. I will not hurt them. I am going to walk to the egg they placed, and I am going to take it and leave. No one here will hurt you today." The horntail's attention changed. She looked at him. She looked at the eggs. She looked at him again, recalibrating whether a threat is a threat. She stepped aside. Harry walked to the golden egg. He picked it up. He looked back at the horntail and nodded, the most accurate gesture available in a species that had no equivalent behavior, but which felt like the right acknowledgement of the arrangement they had made. He walked back out. The crowd was completely silent. 1 minute 47 seconds, said Hermione, looking at her timing charm. Non-violent dragon negotiation. The judging criteria doesn't appear to account for this scenario. The judges awarded full marks. The Beauxbatons headmistress looked at the scores she'd given, and then at the enclosure and back again with the expression of someone who has just graded work that has rendered her rubric inadequate. The second task put them in the lake on a February morning, when the water was cold, in the absolute way of magical cold. The merpeople recognized them before they had been in the water for 30 seconds, felt through the ley line running below the lake, an approach from the southeast, the specific quality of movement indicating purpose rather than patrol. The chief merperson arrived in a column of displaced water and said, in Mermish, that the Le Fay linguistic instinct translated at approximately 90% accuracy, that the House of Emrys and the House of Le Fay were known to the deep places, that the hostages had been released and were waiting at the surface, and that it was an honor. Harry replied, in Mermish he had been working on for 3 weeks, that the honor was mutual and the lake's guardianship was recognized. They were back on the surface in 11 minutes. The maze was the third task, calibrated for a single wizard with a wand and courage. 2 sovereigns with primal sorcery moved through it the way adults move through furniture designed for children, with the easy competence of people whose scale of operation simply exceeds what the furniture was built to accommodate. The Scroot retreated before Harry reached it. Hermione dissipated the boggart with precision that was more analysis than counterspell. The Sphinx's riddle was answered before the Sphinx had finished asking it, which appeared to genuinely surprise the Sphinx. They reached the center. They took the cup together, both hands on the handle simultaneously, which was not in the rules because the rules had not anticipated requiring that specification. The portkey activated. The graveyard arrived all at once, dark and cold, smelling of cut grass and old stone. The ritual was already in progress. A small, hunched figure. A cauldron over a fire. A smaller shape being lowered in. Harry was standing in the graveyard where his parents were buried. He found the headstone without looking for it. James and Lily Potter. Died October 31st, 1981, the dates he had known his whole life as abstract historical facts, becoming now the weight of actual stone in actual ground. The stone was simple. Someone had laid flowers against it once, a long time ago, the petals long since dissolved into mulch, and the ground around it was kept, not by anyone who came regularly but by the nature of the place, the grass shorter here, the stone upright and clean. Someone, at some point, had cared enough to come and had not come back, and the caring itself had left a trace the way caring always does, in small material facts that outlast the person. Hermione put her hand on his arm. She had learned, as he had, that some moments required only presence. He straightened. Stop. The word carried the register that was not volume but weight, the Emery's authority in its full form. Wormtail froze. The ritual's ambient magic hesitated. This ends here. Or it ends later. Which do you prefer? Wormtail dropped the blade. Hermione's hand tightened on Harry's arm. She said, very quietly, not tonight. He looked at her. We need the sixth piece accessible through a living body. If he reconstitutes now, we locate Nagini through him. If we stop the ritual here, the last Horcrux disperses and we lose the thread. A pause. Her voice was steady and she hated what she was saying and she said it anyway. Because it was true. Not tonight. Harry hated the logic. He could not fault it. He looked at Wormtail. Complete the ritual. Then run. Because when I come for him, I come for everyone with him. They portkeyed back to the maze. Harry insisted, when the results were recorded, that it be documented that Cedric and Victor and Fleur had competed genuinely and with honor. The tournament was theirs as much as anyone's. Rita Skeeter's career ended before the week was out, not through legal theater, but through the quiet efficiency of a regulatory system doing what it is supposed to do when someone who has been operating outside it is finally held to the same standard as everyone else. Hermione had written to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement before breakfast the morning after the article appeared, citing the Animagus registry discrepancy in 2 paragraphs. She became, in time, a better journalist. It turned out that accuracy produced work that was more interesting and more durable than anything she had published in the previous decade. Dolores Umbridge arrived at Hogwarts on the 1st of September, carrying a pink cardigan, a fixed smile, and the Ministry's full confidence that she was the most effective administrative instrument they possessed. Educational Decree No. 22 appeared on the Gryffindor notice board at 4:30. By 8:45 that evening, a counter notice had appeared beside it, same format, cleaner typography, citing Charter Article 12, Section 1, which guaranteed educational sovereignty in all Emery's endowed institutions and predated the Ministry's authority by 734 years. The counter notice bore the Emery's seal and a footnote directing interested parties to the full charter text in the Hogwarts library. Hermione had filed it before dinner. Umbridge removed the counter notice at 9. It was back by 9:15. She removed it again. It returned. This exchange continued until Umbridge recognized she was losing a contest against a piece of enchanted parchment and decided to address the source. She found the Sovereign quarters on the 7th floor. The door opened before she knocked. Harry and Hermione were at the central table, working. Umbridge stepped into the room and felt something she had not felt in her professional life, which had been constructed entirely around the principle that she was the most authoritative person in any space she occupied. She felt the animal certainty that she was not. She proceeded with her usual script anyway. This was, professionally speaking, the only script she had. Harry let her finish. The educational decrees, the Ministry's authority, the importance of proper oversight, the necessity of order, the smile that sat on her face like a detail from a painting of a smile rather than the thing itself. He listened to all of it. He offered tea. She declined. When she finished, he picked up the charter and placed it in front of her, open to the correct page. Article 12. This school's curriculum is set under sovereign authority, not ministry authority, for reasons that have been legally valid since 973C. Your educational decrees do not apply within these walls. The ministry has full authority over, she began. Over what was built by the ministry, yes, said Hermione, without looking up. This school wasn't. Read the deed. Third paragraph. Umbridge looked at the deed. Her eyes moved across the text with the quality of someone reading something they would prefer not to understand. In perpetuity, the educational institution hereafter designated Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry shall govern itself under sovereign charter, answerable to the House of Emrys and the House of Lefay. Your decrees are void, said Harry. Your contract with Hogwarts' ministry inspector is void. Your presence on these grounds in an enforcement capacity is void. He was quiet and entirely direct, not threatening, not performing, simply stating the accurate condition of things. You are welcome to remain as a teacher under standard employment terms. If you wish to continue enforcing ministry policy in this building, I'd suggest revising your understanding of whose building it is. Umbridge left the sovereign quarters, walked down 7 flights of stairs, stood in the cold September air, and did not report back to the ministry immediately. Not because she lacked the means. Because she was not entirely certain that what had just happened to her was something she wanted documented. She did not remain as a teacher. The blood quills went to Avalon during the winter break. Harry had told Hermione about them in October. The specific instrument, its mechanism, the particular cruelty of a punishment that made the student's own hand the instrument of their suffering. He had found them in Umbridge's desk during a search conducted under sovereign warrant before her removal from the grounds. 17 of them in a case lined with green velvet, labeled in Umbridge's handwriting with student names and detention dates. They burned them in the Avalon practice hall on a Tuesday afternoon, which required no ceremony to be what it was. Then Hermione wrote the complaint to the Wizengamot's newly formed ethics committee, 12 pages, medical documentation, psychological effect analysis, named defendants, legal citations. Umbridge was tried in April. Found guilty on 7 charter violation counts. When a journalist asked Harry afterward why he hadn't pursued the harshest available sentence, he thought about the question for a moment before answering. Because I'm not building a world where I get to decide what punishment satisfies me emotionally, he said. I'm building a world with a legal structure. The structure decides. My job is to make sure the structure is just. The journalist wrote this down. It ran the following morning on the front page of what was, technically, no longer the Daily Prophet, but the Reformation Circular, the new publication structure that the Imperial Court had established to replace the ministry's captured press infrastructure with something closer to an actual free press. Hermione read it over breakfast and made a small sound of satisfaction. That's the one, she said, meaning the quote. Is it in the archive? It will be, she said, and picked up her quill. The petition was 117 pages, including appendices. Hermione wrote it in 11 days, structurally from foundations outward, charter articles establishing the constitutional basis, documented violations providing the evidential body, proposed remedies constituting the forward framework. Harry read every draft. He amended 3 sentences and added 2 footnotes. Everything else was hers. They filed it simultaneously with Gringotts, the International Confederation of Wizards, and the Wizengamot itself, on a Tuesday morning in June. The Wizengamot chamber was full with the pressed, watchful fullness of an institution that knows it is about to account for itself. Harry and Hermione walked to the center of the floor. They were 15 years old. Some members were looking at them with the expression of people watching something they believe they will be able to dismiss once it opens its mouth. Harry worked through the charter violations in sequence. Article 4, Detention without trial. 23 cases, dates, names, durations. Article 7, Blood status discrimination in educational allocation, classification codes, enforcement history, registry numbers. Article 11, Involuntary magical servitude, the House Elf Registry directly. Article 15, Deliberate suppression of public safety information, Fudge's documented refusal across 4 years to acknowledge Voldemort's return. He worked through it methodically, without drama, each point placed with the specific weight of a fact, verified 3 times and requiring no performance. When he finished, he placed the Emrys ring on the dies. Beneath the floor, the ministry's ley lines shifted, not dramatically, but felt by Harry and by several older Wizengamot members, sensitive enough to register the moment when a building operating under a misapprehension about its own ownership had that misapprehension corrected. Under Article 19 of the Charter of Avalon, I hereby dissolve the Ministry of Magic as constituted, and convene a Reformation Council in its place. All current ministry staff will continue in their positions pending a 60-day review. All educational decrees issued in the past 5 years are retroactively voided. All political prisoners held without charter-compliant trial will be reviewed for immediate release. He paused. The Dementor-staffed prison of Azkaban will be decommissioned and replaced with a charter-compliant detention facility within 18 months. The floor was open for questions. The questions took 6 hours. Some were procedural. Several were outraged. 3 were genuinely substantive, engaging with the Charter's constitutional framework with the seriousness the framework deserved. And Harry answered those 3 in detail, while Hermione distributed the relevant appendix pages to the members who needed them. The outraged questions received the same treatment as the procedural ones, accurate answers, delivered without defensiveness, in the tone of someone who has prepared for every question and found none of them threatening. The chair of the Imperial Court of Sorcery, a new position, an emergency committee structure designed to govern the transition period, was occupied initially by Dumbledore, Amelia Bones, and Arthur Weasley. 3 people Harry had trusted with different things for different reasons, all of whom had the specific quality of caring about the structure of justice rather than its personal benefit to themselves. Cornelius Fudge submitted his resignation at hour 5, not because he was required to, but because the position he was resigning from no longer technically existed in its previous form, and he was at least practical enough to recognize that staying in a dissolved institution served no one. Harry and Hermione did not take positions in the new government. This was not modesty. It was architecture. The sovereign's role was constitutional, the Charter's guarantors, the framework's keepers. If they became its administrators, they would become what every governance system becomes when its foundational authority and its operational authority collapse into the same person, a dynasty. That was the wrong shape. They had built the structure. They trusted the people who would fill it. The 60-day review period was not quiet. It was the specific productive noise of a system in the process of learning what it was. Departments discovering which of their functions were genuinely necessary, and which had existed only to serve the functions that no longer existed. Staff members whose roles had been enforcement of policies now voided found, some with relief, and some with the disorientation of a person whose professional identity had been the policy rather than the work, that they had skills the new structure needed in different configurations. Harry and Hermione attended the transition meetings 3 days a week, and read the department filings every evening. They did not intervene unless the charter was being misread, which happened twice, once by a Department of Magical Law official who had interpreted the 60-day review as an enforcement pause rather than an operational continuity order, and once by a Visingamot clerk who had voided a blood status restriction that was, in this specific instance, actually a competency standard that happened to have been worded badly. Both times the correction was made in writing, in precise charter language, without editorial commentary. The structure could self-correct if you trusted it. The point was to trust it. The Statute of Secrecy conversation happened in February, in a room in Geneva that the International Confederation of Wizards had been using for formal sessions since 1692. Harry and Hermione did not arrive with a repeal motion. They arrived with a proposal, a graduated disclosure framework, beginning with 3 select national governments, Britain, France, and Japan, chosen for specific reasons relating to their existing proximity to magical infrastructure and their political stability, and proceeding at a rate the Confederation controlled, subject to review every 5 years, with the explicit end goal of eventual full integration set at a 50-year horizon. The Confederation's response was the specific response of an institution that has been doing something a particular way for a very long time, encountering a proposal to do it differently. Procedural, cautious, not entirely opposed, requiring more sessions than any individual session's content would appear to justify. They attended every session. Hermione had developed, over 6 years of charter work, the specific patience of someone who understands that institutional change moves at the speed of the institutions rather than the speed of the argument, and that this is not failure, but architecture. Harry had developed the complementary patience of someone who had learned at Avalon that breathing slowly was both a magical technique and a governing philosophy. By June, The framework had 3 provisional signatories. It was not a revolution. It was not even a disclosure. It was a door, cracked open a measured amount, letting in exactly the light that had been agreed upon. "This will take 50 years, said the head of the Japanese delegation, reading the final draft. "Yes," said Hermione, "most things worth doing do." The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in November, on black parchment, in blood-red ink. The handwriting was extraordinary, the precise controlled script of someone who had understood that presentation was a form of power and had practiced it accordingly. The pressure of the quill consistent from the first word to the last, which was the detail Harry noticed most, because consistent pressure meant the writer had not varied in emotion from beginning to end. He had written this the way you write something you have decided about. Harry read it. He passed it across the Avalon breakfast table without comment. Hermione read it. "He's asking for a formal duel. 1-on-1. Traditional terms. I know. You're not going to duel him." "No, what are you going to do?" "Talk to him," said Harry. The pause lasted 4 seconds. "I'll come with you," she said. Obviously, they apparated to the edge of Little Hangleton at dusk. They came without an army, without Aurors behind them, or goblin peacekeepers flanking them, or the Imperial Court's formal escort that Amelia Bones had offered 3 times in increasingly direct terms. They came the way they had always come to things that mattered, together, with the work done in advance, carrying only what they needed. The Death Eaters were assembled in the grounds, 43 before Harry stopped counting. They stood in their masks and robes with the visual grammar of threat, designed to communicate that what waited inside was beyond ordinary opposition. Harry and Hermione walked through them. Not through a fight. Not through any engagement. They simply walked, and the dual sovereignty moved around them the way it always moved, in spaces of concentrated opposition, the will and the mind operating at their natural frequency, creating a field that was not a ward and not a shield, but something older than both. Something that made the wands in 43 hands feel, at the precise moment of raising, like the wrong instrument for the situation, like trying to point a weapon at something that was not an opponent. Most of them did not raise their wands at all. Bellatrix Lestrange was not most of them. She had her wand up before they had passed the 3rd row. Fast. The motion of someone whose relationship with violence was old enough to bypass the instinct that had stopped everyone else. The curse was half-formed when Hermione's right hand moved. 3 fingers, a rotation of the wrist, the Lefay precision applied to a structural hold on the specific magical channels governing Bellatrix's right arm. The arm stopped. Completely, cleanly, Bellatrix stood there with her wand arm immobile, straining against it with the specific fury of someone who has never been physically prevented from doing something before. She looked at Hermione. Hermione did not look back. She was already past her. They walked to the front door of the Riddle House and went in. Voldemort was in the high-backed chair at the far end of the parlor, seated, his hands still on the armrests, watching the door. The new body was intact, tall, pale, the red eyes that had replaced whatever Tom Riddle's eyes had originally been. But the Emrys core was reading him, and what was in the room, beneath the architecture of menace that Tom Riddle had spent 70 years constructing, was a man who was tired, the exhaustion of someone who has been maintaining an enormous effort for an enormous amount of time and has arrived, through the accumulated loss of every anchor he had placed in the world, at a place where the effort is no longer answerable to a purpose. Harry pulled a chair from beside the wall and sat down. Not across the room. Across the table. The way you sit for a conversation. "Lord Emrys," said Voldemort. The voice was still extraordinary, smooth, precise, every consonant placed with the care of someone who understood very young that how you spoke was as important as what you said. Performing nothing. Simply what his voice was. "Tom," said Harry. The jaw tightened. He had always hated that name. The name contained everything he had spent his life trying to replace. The orphan, the half-blood, the boy who had convinced himself and everyone around him that he was something rarer. "You destroyed my anchors," said Voldemort. "Yes, you know what I am without them." "A man," said Harry. "A brilliant, extraordinary man, who spent so much energy becoming not human that he forgot what was interesting about being human in the first place." The silence that followed had weight. the silence of something said accurately that cannot be refuted and requires a moment to simply exist in the room. "I expected you to want a battle," said Voldemort. "Why?" Harry leaned forward slightly, the posture of someone engaged in a conversation rather than a confrontation. "You've lost. There's nothing to battle. The Horcruxes are gone. You're mortal again. The ministry you spent 50 years trying to undermine doesn't exist anymore. We dissolved it in June. Your Death Eaters are standing in the grounds waiting for a signal that isn't going to come." He paused. "You're not what I need to fight, Tom. You're a wounded man in a room." Voldemort's hands moved on the armrests. "You're not afraid of me." "No, Dumbledore was afraid of me. Not of my power. Of my wrongness. Even Dumbledore was afraid." "Dumbledore was afraid of what you represent," said Harry. "I'm not afraid of what you represent, because I know what the alternative looks like. I've been building it for 6 years. He held Voldemort's gaze. "I'm not afraid of you, Tom. I'm sorry for you. That's worse." The room was very still. What happened in Voldemort's face in the following silence was the most unguarded thing Harry had ever seen from him, not in any of the possessions. Not in the graveyard. Not in the ministry. A crack in the construction. Not dramatic, but present. The moment when the boy who had grown up in an orphanage being told he was nothing, who had built Lord Voldemort as a complete and total answer to that telling, encountered someone who looked at all of it, and felt sorry, and found that he had no defense prepared for that. He had prepared for fear, for hatred, for opposition. Compassion was not in the architecture. "What do you want from me?" said Voldemort. The voice was almost nothing. Not the extraordinary instrument it had been. Just sound. Just the vehicle for a question that was more honest than anything he'd said in 50 years. "Surrender," said Harry. "Formal surrender to the Imperial Court. Trial under the Charter system. Whatever that results in, you accept it. And if I refuse? Then we continue this conversation for as long as you need to." Harry did not move, did not add any weight to the statement. "I have time." In the grounds, not a single Death Eater moved. They were watching through the parlor windows, their master and a 17-year-old across a table, and the 17-year-old was doing the one thing none of them had seen done to Voldemort in their lifetimes, waiting for him, patiently, without urgency, as though the outcome were not in question, and only the timing was uncertain. Tom Riddle sat in his chair and looked at the boy across from him. This boy who carried inside him 1,000 years of the oldest magic in the world, and wore it without performance, without cruelty, without the need to make anyone afraid. He looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "I, Tom Marvolo Riddle, formally surrender to the authority of the Imperial Court of Sorcery and the House of Emrys." The words were flat, drained of performance. He stated a fact in the only honest voice he had left. Harry nodded. "Hermione, I have it," said Hermione. From the chair she had taken near the window, her notebook open, her quill steady, she looked at Voldemort with the direct, assessing quality she brought to everything she examined. "The binding compact will be filed within 24 hours. You'll be transferred to a charter-compliant facility before the week is out." She tilted her head by 3 degrees. "The facility has a library, Tom, if you want to study magic again, without the ulterior motive. There's nothing in the charter that prevents it." Voldemort looked at her. He said nothing. But something crossed his face. Not softness. Nothing that clean. Something older and more fragmentary. The ghost of a boy in a library at 11 years old, holding a book that told him the world contained things worth wanting, before he had decided the only way to want them safely was to become something that couldn't be refused. The ghost was brief. Then it was gone. But it had been there. Harry was walking back through the grounds when Bellatrix started screaming. She was being cuffed, directing the scream at Harry with the personal fury of someone who has spent years building a relationship with violence, and is watching the person they wanted to apply it to walk away unconcerned. Harry looked at her once, in the way he looked at things that required acknowledgement but not engagement. "You'll have a good public defender," he said. "The new system is fair." He kept walking. Hermione fell into step beside him at the edge of the grounds, notebook closed, the binding compact filed via Goblin Courier 4 minutes ago. "Done," she said. "Done," he said. They walked to the apparition point in the quiet of a November evening, the lights of Little Hangleton below them. A man in a chair who had surrendered not to force, but to the weight of being looked at honestly for the first time in his life. The war was over. Not with a battle, not with a curse. With a conversation, a long silence, and the one thing Tom Riddle had never once, in 70 years, been offered, and had therefore never developed a defense against. Harry had offered him the truth about himself, without hatred and without satisfaction. The truth had been enough. The year after Voldemort's surrender began at a desk. Not a ceremonial desk. The working desk in the Avalon Library's East Wing accumulated over 6 years with the specific archaeology of sustained intellectual effort. The permanent ink stain at the upper left corner from a quill Hermione had dropped in year 3. The groove worn along the right edge where Harry rested his wrist while reading. On the 4th day back, Hermione put the first reform document on the desk, and they began. The curriculum reform came first. Hermione wrote it in 6 weeks, the core integration methodology extracted from the Merlin codices, translated through her LeFay instinct fluency, simplified to the point where it could be taught to a motivated 3rd year without requiring them to already be a sovereign. She tested it on herself, found the gaps, fixed them. Harry found 3 places where the sequencing was wrong. She fixed those too. McGonagall, who chaired the educational committee, read it twice, made 7 annotations in the margins, and approved it with a note that read, "This is 40 years overdue. We begin in September." What that meant in practice was this: students who had been told for years that their results were insufficient, that their spell work was imprecise, that they lacked the natural aptitude others possessed, some of them found, in the first term of the new curriculum, that the problem had never been aptitude. The problem had been a method designed for median core depth applied uniformly to practitioners whose core structure operated at a different frequency entirely. The wand they had been issued, the spells they had been taught, the assessment criteria they had been measured by, all of it had been calibrated for someone they had never been, which meant they had spent years failing at something they were not failing at. They had been succeeding at the wrong thing, and what looked like failure from the outside was simply the friction of a mechanism running against its own grain. The first year the new curriculum ran, the failure rate in core integration theory was 12%, compared to 63% in the equivalent year of the previous structured defense curriculum. McGonagall wrote to Harry about this with the specific controlled fury of someone who has been running an institution for 40 years and has just understood, in precise detail, what it had been doing wrong. He wrote back, "I know. That's why we started with year 1. Hermione is developing the remedial sequence for students already in the system. It will be available in January." McGonagall wrote, "Tell her thank you." Harry told her. Hermione wrote it in the archive under Implementation Notes, Year 1, and continued. The creature covenants took longer, not because the charter's basis was unclear, but because implementation required negotiation rather than legislation. You could not grant citizenship rights to Goblin Nation representatives through a unilateral court decree without consulting the Goblin Nation about what citizenship rights they actually wanted. That was not liberation. That was the same error the wizarding world had been making for 3 centuries. Simply in a different direction. Ragnarok sat across from Harry and Hermione in the Avalon formal meeting room for 11 sessions over 4 months. At the second session, he said, "We do not want what you have. We want what we are owed. What we are owed is sovereignty over our own affairs, legal standing to enforce our contracts without requiring a wizard intermediary, and the formal acknowledgement that the Goblin Sovereignty Accords of 1752 were violated, serially, by every Minister for Magic for the following 240 years. That acknowledgement is being drafted," said Hermione. "It will be issued by the Imperial Court publicly and permanently entered into the Wizengamot record. Then we can begin discussing citizenship," said Ragnarok. The house elf provisions were different. The voluntary release protocol worked with the constraints of the magical bond rather than against them. Any house elf could request review of their binding, with goblin legal support, and receive an assessment of whether the bond had been formed by genuine choice or magical coercion. For elves whose bonds were coercive, release was available. For those who had formed genuine attachments of service, contracted employment was structured to preserve the relationship without the constraint. Dobby was the first applicant, which was technically redundant since he had been free for 2 years. He reviewed his own case, confirmed his freedom was genuine, and then asked if there was a job available. Harry said yes. Chief Domestic Wizard of the Imperial Court generated a month of confused correspondence from international magical delegations before anyone understood what it meant in practice. Dobby ran the logistics. Every meeting arranged, every document filed in the correct sequence, every visiting delegation provided with information in their own language and tea at the right temperature. At the third international delegation, a French ministerial representative asked Harry who was responsible for the operational organization. Harry said Dobby's name. The representative looked at Dobby, small, large-eared, wearing a tea towel hat that was his own personal design choice, and then looked at Harry with the expression of someone updating a category. Dobby's ears went up. He liked being seen correctly. He had spent decades not being seen at all. The Emrys primers went to press in March, 7 volumes, 7 languages simultaneously. Volume 1 sold out in 48 hours. The waiting list for the Arabic edition was 3 years long. In Damascus, a 17-year-old witch who had been struggling with a magical signature her teachers described as unusually deep opened Volume 1 on a Thursday morning, and read the first chapter on core integration breathing without stopping. She performed the first exercise. The temperature in her room dropped 12 degrees. She performed it again and brought it back. She wrote to the address printed in the back and received a reply in 14 days, 2 pages, in Arabic, in Hermione's handwriting. The third paragraph said, "Your signature suggests LeFay resonance on the structural side. If you can access Volume 4 by March, the spiral progression in Chapter 6 will be specifically useful. The work is difficult, but the difficulty is the point." The girl read the reply 4 times. Then she ordered Volume 4. The LeFay signature reading methodology, the technique Hermione had extracted from Volume 12 for identifying core depth and magical structure in individual practitioners, was published separately, as a standalone monograph, at Ragnar's suggestion. He had been watching the reform process with the specific satisfaction of a man completing a custodial contract that had run 1,000 years, and was now arriving at its intended function. The signature reading alone, Ragnar said, at the quarterly Gringotts Review meeting, will change magical education more fundamentally than anything since the founding of Hogwarts. Most practitioners have never had an accurate assessment of their own core structure. We have been teaching them toward a standard they don't match, and away from a ceiling they don't know they're hitting. "I know," said Hermione. She had known since year 1. She had simply needed the governance framework to exist before publishing it. The speech in Geneva was in April. Harry stood at the podium in sovereign robes, 17 years old by 3 months, entirely at ease. He spoke for 22 minutes. The bulk of it was practical: the graduated disclosure framework, the creature covenants, the curriculum reform, the codex publication schedule. He was specific. He cited numbers and dates and the names of the people who had done the work, because the work was not his alone, and the record should reflect that accurately. The last 3 minutes were not practical. "Magic is not a hierarchy," he said. "It is not a lineage. It is not a privilege or a purity. Magic is a relationship between a person and the oldest forces in the world. Anyone who can form that relationship is a magical practitioner, regardless of their birth, their blood, their wand, or their nation. The era that said otherwise is over. What we build now will determine whether the next era is something we're proud of." The room was quiet. Not politely quiet. The particular quiet of 43 nations simultaneously processing something they had needed to hear, said in exactly those words by someone with the authority to mean it. The codices are open. The charter is open. The court is open. We are not here to rule. We are here to restore. The magic was always yours. We are simply returning it to you. In the third row, Dobby's ears went fully upright. He wrote 1 line in his personal shorthand: "Yes." That. Exactly that. He underlined it twice, then went back to taking minutes, because the work was not finished and the minutes needed to be accurate, and those 2 things were, in the end, the same commitment. There is a morning, 10 years after Gringotts, when Harry sits on the cliff edge of the Isle of Avalon before anyone else is awake. The Bristol Channel is gray-green below him, the water catching the first light at an angle that turns it briefly silver before settling back to its ordinary color. The castle behind him is warm. He can feel its ley-line signature through the grass. The deep familiar resonance of a place that has been his for so long that the boundary between the building's magic and his own has become difficult to locate precisely. He is 21 years old. He has been in this particular seat, on this particular cliff enough mornings that the grass has a faint impression where he sits. He is thinking about his parents, not the grief that has been lived with, turned over in his hands enough times that he knows its exact weight and texture, and has found a way to carry it that does not require putting anything else down. He is thinking about who they were. James Potter, who played Quidditch with the specific joy of someone whose body understood flight before his mind understood much else. Lily Evans, who had loved a boy from Cokeworth and decided, at some point before Harry was born, that the world's wrong things were worth fighting with the full force of everything she had. He wonders what they would see, looking at this morning. He has, in 10 years, put their photographs in 3 places, one in the Avalon study, one in the London flat he rarely uses, and one on the windowsill of this castle that has been his home longer than any other. In all 3 photographs they are moving, his father laughing at something off to the left of the frame, his mother turning to see what it is, her expression beginning to shift from curiosity into the specific warmth of someone who knows already that whatever it is, it will be worth seeing. They are always in that moment, the moment just before. He has spent 10 years building toward a world where the thing that killed them could not kill anyone else. And he has spent the same 10 years thinking about the photograph, about the moment just before, about what they might have been in the years they didn't get. Who James Potter would have been at 40, who Lily Evans Potter would have been at 40, whether they would have argued about things that didn't matter or learned not to bother, whether his father would have softened and his mother would have found a way to be less afraid of the world's smallness. He doesn't know. He'll never know. He has found, over time, that this is not the worst thing. The worst thing would be not thinking about it at all. He thinks they would see someone who had, against significant odds, found a way to be worth the life they gave him. Not perfectly, not without cost or error, but worthily, in the way that Merlin had meant when he wrote Go Well. Be worthy, not as command but as the description of a direction. The thing you aim at knowing you will sometimes miss. The sun comes over the hill behind the castle. The channel catches it properly now. Hermione sits beside him. She doesn't ask what he's thinking. She has been with him long enough that the silhouette of his thoughts is legible to her, not through any sovereign magic. Just through 9 years of working alongside someone until their habits of mind become as familiar as your own. After a while she says, Volume 32 has an interesting passage. Merlin writes that power is not the gift. The capacity to care about what you do with it is the gift. Harry considers this. That sounds like something someone says after a long time. He wrote it in his last volume. He was very old. She looks at the water. I think he was trying to explain something he hadn't fully understood until the end. Do you think he was happy at the end? Hermione takes this seriously, in the way she takes everything seriously, turning it over, not rushing toward an answer that is slightly wrong when a better one is available. I think he was satisfied, she says finally. I think there's a difference. Happy is something that comes and goes. Satisfied is something you build. She looks out at the channel. I think we're building it. Harry looks at the water. The light is fully up now, the castle's shadow stretching across the south lawn, the gardens in the pattern Merlin had encoded into the soil 1,000 years ago moving through their morning arrangement. Somewhere inside, Dobby is already in the kitchen. The Imperial Court's morning correspondence sorted into 3 priority categories, the day organized before either of them has stood up. Yes, said Harry. I think we are. Hogwarts is still the castle. This is important. The towers are still impossible, the staircases still change, the Great Hall ceiling still shows the weather. The things about Hogwarts that were always right are still right. What has changed is what happens inside it. First years now spend 3 years on magical foundation before specializing, wandwork and wandless practice running side by side, the history of magical governance taught from primary sources. Neville Longbottom teaches herbology, his wandless herbology gift maintaining the plants in a state of extraordinary organization. He is, at 31, one of the most effective teachers in the school's history, not because he is brilliant in the way Harry and Hermione are brilliant, but because he remembers what it was to find magic difficult, and teaches from that memory, rather than despite it. Luna Lovegood teaches magical creature studies in a room redesigned around the needs of the creatures, which means students learn to adjust themselves to the room rather than the other way around. Most of them find this the most useful thing they learn all year. Ron heads Hogwarts Quidditch program and is increasingly the person students seek when the thing they need is not advice, but presence. He has a gift for sitting with people that requires no magical explanation. Sirius is somewhere in Southeast Asia on a motorcycle that has been modified with 17 enchantments, the most recent addition being a self-navigation charm Hermione installed during his last Avalon visit, that he claims he doesn't use, and demonstrably does. He writes letters in the specific mode of someone who has discovered, at 46, that the life he was supposed to have is still available, and is taking it at full speed. The letters are long and digressive, and frequently describe meals in loving detail. He ends every one the same way. Tell Hermione I said she's right. Don't tell her about what. Harry always tells her. Remus Lupin is in Geneva, running the Imperial Court's Werewolf Protection Program, now in its 4th year, which has produced legal recognition for werewolves as full citizens under the court's jurisdiction in 31 nations. He is tired in the way of someone doing important work at sustainable speed. He is happy in the way of someone who found, later than he expected but not too late, a life that matches the person he actually is. His son Teddy can change his hair to any color on demand and currently favors turquoise. He is 4 years old. He has his mother's ability to be in a room and immediately know who in it needs attention most. In the charter-compliant facility in the north of Scotland, Tom Riddle reads. He is not reformed, not in the way of stories where a man's character reverses under the pressure of consequence. He does not like Harry Potter. He has no warmth for the court that holds him. But he reads the Emrys primers with the focused, obsessive attention of the brilliant boy he had been, before he decided that brilliance needed to be armored. He works through the core integration exercises alone in his room, in the early mornings, with the same patience he once applied to finding ways around every magical constraint he encountered. The difference is that the constraint he is working around now is himself. He does not describe it as progress. But the small wandless exercises are becoming less small. And something in the frequency of his magical signature, as logged by the facility's monitoring charms, has shifted approximately 3% in the direction of coherence over the past 18 months. Harry reads the quarterly report. He does not comment. Hermione says, "Interesting. The methodology reaches everyone eventually." Harry files the report. He moves on to the next thing, because there is always a next thing, and Tom Riddle's story is his own to finish. The role of the structure is to give him the conditions under which finishing it correctly is possible. What he does with those conditions is not Harry's to control. He never wanted to control it. That was the whole point. The Imperial Court of Sorcery's first decade anniversary ceremony takes place in the Wizengamot Chamber, which has been redesigned. Less theater in the round, more architecture, high windows letting in actual light. The Charter's founding article engraved in the stone behind the dais in Merlin's original language, and in 17 translations beneath it. The room is full. Every seat, in every tier. 43 national delegations. The Goblin section in formal robes. The Creature Covenant signatories in the observer chairs that were added in Year 3. Harry and Hermione stand at the dice. They are 21 years old. They have been doing this work for 10 years and they carry it the way they carry everything now. Not as weight, but as the specific quality of people who have found the thing they were built to do, and have been doing it long enough that it has become inseparable from who they are. Harry speaks. He names the people. He names the work. He reads from the Charter's founding article, not ceremonially, not as performance, but because the words are accurate, and accuracy is the highest form of tribute available. The first magic was not power. The first magic was attention, The act of one consciousness turning toward the world and saying, I see you. I am here. What needs to be done? He looks up. In the gallery above, visible if you know where to look, is an old man in deep purple robes. Silver beard, half-moon spectacles, a bag of sherbet lemons held in both hands. Albus Dumbledore, who spent most of his life arranging things toward an end he believed only he could see, and lived to watch two people build something better than his end by building it differently. He is crying. Not dramatically. The quiet tears of someone who has been given, at the end of a very long life, the specific grace of having been wrong in the best possible way. Harry looks at him. Across the chamber, across the 10 years, across everything that had been between them, the plan he had never been told about, the war he had fought on his own terms, the world he had built not because it had been arranged for him, but because he and Hermione had looked at what was wrong and addressed it. One document and one Horcrux, and one charter article at a time. He nods. Not with deference. With the simple, clean acknowledgement of one person to another who had mattered. Who had been, in their way, part of this, even when their way had been insufficient. You were here. The world needed someone to hold what you held until we were ready to carry it. You did that. It was enough. Dumbledore nods back. He takes a sherbet lemon. Hermione's hand finds Harry's at the dice. Not for the audience. The habit of 10 years, the reflex of two people who have been each other's constant architecture for so long that contact is not a gesture but a fact, the will and the mind, the Emrys and LeFay, still in the room together, still in the work together, still the thing Merlin had spent the last years of his life trying to arrange. Go well, the charter says. Be worthy. Remember what you carry. The room is full of light. The work continues. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.